Dearest brothers and sisters, this is Reverend Melissa, and I just wanted to speak with you briefly to share with you my testimony of the Ancient Word series. As we all have beginnings from somewhere, I was not always a minister. My ministry did not begin until the summer of 2005. Prior to 2005, I was married. I was a wife, and at one point during my marriage, an expectant wife. In 2001, my husband, now my former husband, Dean, and I were expecting the birth of our first child, our son. His name was Aiden, but he was stillborn at 34 weeks, and it was the death of our son that pretty much pushed me into a direction that led me to the Ancient Word series. How, you may ask? In that during that time, I just knew that there was something wrong. I didn't know how, didn't know what. I had diligently made all of my prenatal appointments with my obstetrician and her midwives, never missed an appointment. My husband was a geologist, is a geologist, and though he worked out of the country, he still stayed in constant contact and came home in between his different locations, and we were happily expecting the birth of our child. And yet what we did not realize at the time was that the physician and her midwives had been providing me with substandard prenatal care. And it was through much prayer and later on research that I discovered that my pregnancy was a horror, because I had a pre-existing condition at the onset of my pregnancy of anemia, and for nearly 9 months of going to prenatal appointments with my physician, and them taking samples, not once did they ever acknowledge the anemia. So what happened was that I developed preeclampsia, and went into preterm labor between the 8th and 9th month. And when I gave birth to the child, there was no blood. I had very little blood. And for many of you who have children, especially our mothers out there, you know that having a child is worse than your most heaviest monthly cycle. So it was a traumatic experience. But I say all of that to say that following that time, at the time I always cleaved to and read my King James Bible, and it was the Psalms and the Proverbs that gave me solace during that time. But as time went on, between 2001 and 2005, I just spent a lot of time in prayer, just devoted practically my whole life to asking God why and asking Him for help, because mentally I was spiraling downward. My marriage was, a toll was being taken on my marriage. As a matter of fact, so much so that in 2005 my husband and I divorced. And it was during that time that I started, in reading my Bible, I began to hear someone speaking to me. Could not really ever see them, but I was blessed that I could hear them. And one day, I would always go outside with my little golden retriever, and we would be sitting in the backyard. And one day I was sitting in my backyard, and I looked up into the sky in Tallahassee, and I saw two images that were identical, as if they were observing me. And then I looked more closely at them, and they looked more so like created beings than just clouds. And for some reason, I just knew that they were angels, and I acknowledged them, and I asked them if it was okay if I could take a photo of them. So I darted in the house, and I ran and found my digital camera, and I came back and I took a picture, and I still have that picture somewhere. One day I'll have to relocate it and find it and post it on this site so that you can see. But it was that day that I realized that we were being observed, that I was being observed. And it was on that day that I received a message. And I heard a voice that said, "Make an offering unto me. Fast and pray, and make me a bloodless offering." So as crazy as this may sound, I used to bake bread with lots of fruits and nuts, and I would offer them on my grill in my backyard as an offering unto God, and He accepted my offerings. It's amazing, our God. He is so wonderful, because along the way, as I progressed and began to grow even more so, it was as though my spiritual eyes had been closed. But as I began to read more, and from the King James Bible I went on to the Douay-Rheims Bible, I just read every Bible that I could get a hold of, and then after I read all of the Bibles, I just devoured every ancient text, every ancient text that I could find. I read it. And it was during that time that I came across the Gospel of Peace and the Gospel of the Holy 12, and so many other writings, the Apocalypse of Abraham, the Shepherd of Hermas, and none of these were available to humankind. And it was at that time that I prayed and I asked God, I asked Him, I said, I'd like to work for you. What can I do for you? And He gave me an order. He told me to teach you. He said to teach them of my ways. And thus began the creation of the Ancient Word series. Having read the Gospel of Peace and the Gospel of the Holy 12, I realized that whoever had written those texts, that they were using the wrong name, because Christ Jesu's name was not Jesus. Upon reading the Gospel of the Holy 12, clearly in there it says that His name was the Holy Archangel Gabriel instructed Mary to name Christ Jesu Maria the Christ. So with that being said, all the texts from the Gospel of the Holy 12 to the Gospel of Peace, all of that, Jesus had to be pulled out. Christ Jesu Maria had to be placed there. And then also, the Creator stressed to me how important it is for everyone to know and to say His name. All of the churches refuse to say His name except for the Jehovah's Witnesses, and yet His name isn't Jehovah. It's Yah, it's the Y, so it would be Yahovah. The V has a W sound as opposed to Jehovah. But I think thankfully, Abba Ama Arawat, and that is his name per the first and second book of Enoch, his name in Hebrew, that we are to use. So brothers and sisters, this is just a little brief snippet of who Reverend Mel is and what the Ancient Word series is all about. Having now been a minister for going on 4 or 5 years, it's not easy. It really isn't. So please support. We bless and thank you for your support, and please continue to support the Ancient Word series and discover all of the texts that are there. They're not there for me, they're there for you. We love you. Reverend Mel.